Hey guys, it's Matthew here once again, and I wanted to give you an update video on the Elementalist Detonate Dead character that I started for the solo self-found hardcore flashback event sort of challenge. Now the character did hit level 82 and at this point it is absolutely dead, and I'll show you the rip clip for that in just a few minutes after I go over what happened with this character, how it played out, and my experience doing it through solo, self-found, and hardcore especially. So let me just start out by saying that Detonate Dead itself is a little bit clunky still, even on the life-based version, but it still, to me, felt better than just about every other spell I tried, including things like Magma Orb and Ball Lightning, but that is mostly because I just don't really have the gear enabling or build enabling uniques that come from certain things like Magma Orb Threshold Jewels or the right damage and links for things like Ball Lightning. So I did try a bunch of other skills, and I think Magma Orb for this Elementalist would have been the best choice had I 2 Threshold Jewels and could have built a little bit differently, but Detonate Dead served its purpose and actually felt like a pretty strong skill. The only real problem being that you do need corpses to lay down every now and again before you actually start doing any sort of explosions. Against quite a lot of packs, sometimes you will be able to get the auto explosions going through killing things first with Orb of Storms or Herald of Thunder, but without the last 4 Ascendancy points towards the Shock and the Prolif, I don't think it's quite as smooth as it otherwise could have been. So I really do feel that with a bit more gear and like something like an Impulsus, for example, just some crit multi on my neck, or the actual 4 Ascendancy points to get the Prolif and Shock, the character would have played out really smooth, and Detonate Dead would have been probably one of my favorite sort of caster skills to use to date. But without all of that, just speccing into the Herald nodes like I did because I needed the penetration, the reservation from Heralds, and the damage, it just wasn't quite all there to become the nicest playing spellcaster build out there, but it was good enough and I thought better than most other skills, so Detonate Dead is still something I think I can recommend, because doing this as solo self-found with complete trash for gear in some cases, and on hardcore playing it fairly safely so I didn't, balls rush too much, and I did try and build into quite a lot more life than I usually would, it was still fairly successful in what it could clear, the damage it could deal, and the way it could scale throughout the game while maintaining pretty bad stats of gear and damage. For what it is, it was actually still really good damage. So there wouldn't really be too much else to talk about, but I will go over the character in detail after the clips. More or less, I'll just say that yeah, it looked a little clunky at times and a little slow at times, but at times it was really good with the way it could kill and farm Beyond and Breach, and certain bosses and certain encounters felt really good with the Detonate Dead. But we'll jump straight into the rip clip for now. So I was running one of my first tier 6 maps at the time, and I came across this legendary beast which was kind of doing me a bit of a headache, and it wasn't a good omen for what was to come. Basically, these red beasts were just pretty tough, and especially for my character, which really couldn't particularly face tank them since I didn't really have Fortify yet, or any particularly defensive flasks, and it was just a little bit tough, and then it led to what happened next, which was probably one of my sadder deaths, because there wasn't too much going on. I just ran into a pack of monsters that I shouldn't have, and then got kind of bwapped several times. And ultimately, all it really meant was I definitely needed to have my Fortify attached to a shield charge by now, and maybe at least a defensive flask. Now I do also actually want to touch on something with the rip clips that you see floating about, usually through the Reddits, of your favorite streamers dying, that once you grab these clips, you see the clip just as is here, to actually analyze the clip a bit better, because I don't always see people doing this, is just slowing it down by hitting the options, turning the speed into 0.25, and then you can get a much better understanding as to what killed you or what killed that player, and then you can really truly analyze what happened and what you could have done differently. So if we turn it to 0.25 speed, you can see pretty clearly that I run into the pack, I get hit quite a few times before anything even happens. This guy gets fully beefed up with the legacy of Zeal, so he's much more, hits a lot harder and a lot faster, and I just didn't have enough life at the time to handle that. So it's pretty simple in the end what exactly happened there. It was just a bunch of damage, and I didn't really have the survivability to do what I did when I did it, because I definitely needed to play that a little bit safer given my current status. So there probably isn't too much to say about this character because it is a pretty simple spellcaster, I'd say, at its core, but I will talk a bit about Detonate Dead itself. So the way Detonate Dead works is it gives you a bunch of front-loaded fire damage after exploding a corpse, and then some additional fire damage based off of the corpse maximum life, and that is scaled through fire damage, elemental damage, and all of that as well. So to actually use the skill, you do need a corpse. So without any corpses straight away, you can't do anything, which is why we have Desecrate attached to Spell Cascade, because originally it creates 5 corpses. With Spell Cascade, you use it 3 times, thus creating 15 corpses, and attached to faster casting as well. So prior to winding up against quite a lot of monsters, you will run your Desecrate, and then you can start landing lots and lots of Detonate Deads. Now likewise, you do also have an Unearth over here, which just shoots actual corpses at an enemy, attached to a spell totem and a GMP, so that you're firing off 5 corpses per attack. And that's entirely up to the Unearthed Totem to do, which is primarily used for, let's say, boss fights mostly, but also things like Harbingers, Abysses, Breaches. You're just creating extra corpses continually without having to use Desecrate, without having to rely on enemies dying themselves and creating corpses. So with the combo of Unearth and Desecrate, it is a lot easier to play Detonate Dead than ever before, and can be pretty smooth, but it is still a 2-step system a lot of the time to actually set your corpses up. Now, I do think that if I had, in the end, having Shaper of Desolation and Beacon of Ruin, that's what is really largely going to help with clear speed, thanks to your Orb of Storms, or just your Herald of Thunder, your Flame Dash, whatever it is. Just the prolif, shock, and then explosions are going to cause quite a lot more corpses to be created for you without ever needing to use a Desecrate or an Unearth throughout map clear. So I couldn't really get up to my Uber Lab because, well, I only hit level 82. I did, several dozens maps and all that. I found 1 trial in the end out of the 6 I needed. Even though I am capable of doing Uber Lab at this level, I think it should have been pretty easy for this character. It just wasn't something that was ever presentable to me at this point, so I couldn't get the Uber Lab, and I valued Mastermind of Discord too much for the fire penetration, the additional fire damage, and the reservation that you get from reduced reservation of your heralds here. So I took these first. I then grabbed Paragon of Calamity just for a bit of extra leech and reflect immune against maps, because these first 2 points aren't very good. And if I got to my Uber Lab, I would have gone ahead and grabbed this. Alternately, I'm not too sure this was the right move. Maybe Beacon of Ruin would have helped clear speed and just the feel of the character a lot more. You do need a little bit of shock to get it going, or lightning damage, which I was getting from Herald of Thunder, or my actual mace itself just gives some lightning damage to spells. But I went with this one, and it was still fine. I just think for a smoother clear speed, you do need all of your Ascendancy points on the Elementalist, and then I really truly think it would have felt quite good and quite enjoyable to play. At this stage, it was just a little bit of a struggle having to rely on corpses and the slightly slow and clunky method around certain maps and certain mob types, but it was still, I think, pretty enjoyable for what it was. I did get a solid 18 hours of playtime with solo self-found hardcoring on this character, and like I said, I thought it was one of the better skills I used compared to Magma Orb and Ball Lightning, which really needed just a few more specific things to work. So in the end, I was running Detonate Dead with Spell Cascade right from level 16, but by the time you get to about 38 for Spell Echo, that's when I think you want to drop Cascade and start using Echo. So then it becomes Detonate Dead, Spell Echo. I then ran Fire Pen, so that's basically my 3-link. Ellie Focus was my 4th link, and then Crit Strikes was my 5th link. Ultimately, a 6th link is probably going to be Controlled Destruction, and maybe not even Ellie Focus, because we definitely do want to start shocking with our Beacon of Ruin. But before I have that, my elemental statuses don't actually really do anything, so Ellie Focus is totally fine there. Like I said though, then Controlled Destruction, and you can play around with Increased Area and Conk Effect as well as need be. Besides that, there really is not much else to mention on the character. It's some pretty basic gear. I'll hopefully try and link it in the forum thread. Just trying to get some life and resists everywhere, and trying to get some fire damage, Ellie damage, crit, crit multi, whatever you can on a scepter. Cast speed goes a long way as well, but this is the best I could come up with at this point of the character, and it is fairly weak. Now, my actual mana reservation, I was running Warlord's Mark Blasphemy as soon as I could. I was also running Herald of Ash because it helps with the overlap damage and the more fire spell damage. So that too. And then I was running Herald of Thunder after getting these points here, just for some additional help on clearing with the Thunder strikes, or Lightning strikes rather, and some additional damage too. So that was my mana reservation, and I was also running Orb of Storms attached to Arcane Surge and Power Charge on crit, just getting some power charges occasionally, but also mostly just to have my Arcane Surge up for the cast speed, for the damage, and mostly for the mana regen. Mana is never going to feel too good unless you're actually leeching with Warlord's Mark Blasphemy, so when you're near things, you do get some decent leech, but when you're not, it's going to feel a bit of a struggle unless you have your Arcane Surge up all of the time. And I couldn't ever really get Shield Charge to work into the build yet because my weapon is pretty slow and my attack speed wasn't really existent, which is why I didn't have Shield Charge Fortify and why I died. So that's something that definitely should have been fixed by me, but never could have been because it's pretty tough with the gear I had available. So then lastly, the skill tree progression. I did it pretty normally, I would have thought. Went up to through the Witch and straight away went into Templar to grab the life and the area. I then went over to Shadow to start grabbing the life, crit, and fill out my dexterity because it is kind of hard to keep up with your dexterity on things like a Detonate Dead early on, so I wanted to get to Shadow pretty quickly. I did have to take 130 dexterity node, and by level 40 or 50, that's when I started to really ramp some crit. Took some of the crit nodes here, these over here, and then by level 60, 70 or so is when I started to go for more life and just fill out life everywhere on the tree. So in the end, I did have something like 200% life. I just needed to be a little bit more durable through certain other defenses like Fortify, maybe a different flask like Basalt or Granite, and then I think it should have been fine. But ultimately, I think for this character to work as an entire package, you need just a little bit more cast speed, slightly different damage focused gear, and then of course your actual Uber Ascendancy, which I think is completely huge for the feel goodness of a character like this. But ultimately, Magmarol probably would have done a better job if you're really into that sort of thing. You just need 2 Threshold Jewels, and you only get 1 of them from the Act 5 quest. So I had to find a second one, but that's pretty hard to do, really. So all in all, I'd say the character's pretty fun. I wouldn't really recommend anyone copy this for solo self-found hardcore. It's a bit of a struggle. For a softcore league, it definitely should be something that can be very fun. Or with the right gear as well on a non-solo self-found league, maybe even hardcore. But yeah, it was fun, and I do not regret doing it at all, and hopefully you guys are killing it out in your race experience. But for now, guys, that's all I've got for you. I'm going to be building a Berserker Debion's Dirge character, still on solo self-found hardcore, so we'll see how that goes the next few days. But thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.